All right, y'all. So we're back here again, and today we're going to really start moving into actual theoretical explanations for crime and delinquency. And for this particular week, what we're starting off with is something that is at the center of the modern criminal justice system. It's something that surrounds us all the time. And when we think about our responses from police, when we think about our responses in the correction system, if we think about how, like every other theory that's built off of it, right, we start with sort of like this grandfather of them all. And this is namely really more from like deterrence kind of control theories, right? And so this is the first of what's called a quote-unquote control theory, although usually it's just labeled by itself. The important part is that what we'll talk about in this module is talking a little bit about deterrence theory, rational choice theory, and routine activities theory, right? So when we think about this, right, so what we'll kind of do, right, is I will sort of introduce ideas like talking, and we'll kind of illustrate, same with the other videos so far, and just like take it from there. So when we think about like deterrence theory, like what is it, right? So how did this come to be? How did this come about? This idea, original deterrence theory, comes from like in the late 1700s, early 1800s, I believe. And I might be wrong on that, and you know what? That's okay, because it would not be the first time, and it probably won't be the last either. Anyway, so at the time that this idea is being put out, it's in Europe, this is in Italy, and we have a system of law enforcement that's handled locally, right? So if you go to a local village, there may be like a sheriff, there may be like a local magistrate or someone who's in charge of, like adjudicating the court, right? And the way this would work is that, let's say that you were accused of committing a crime, you may be captured, you may be put into jail, held to a dungeon. There may not be any evidence. There may not actually be like a real trial. There may not be anything that's coming about, but it was basically like, yeah, we're just going to lock you up. You have to prove your case, right? So you don't really have an opportunity to contest it because they're sort of waiting for you out to admit your own guilt, or they're waiting for you to see the error of your ways, or to maybe like confess to other crimes, or maybe stuff that's going on in the other neighborhood. The other part is that a lot of people don't read, or they don't know how to read, and which is a huge problem in this era. And like there was this based off of understanding that since there wasn't like really a written law, and that many people couldn't read, that a lot of things were held by common law, right? And so it was like a judge would be like, yeah, we'll agree, like this is okay or this is not okay. Here are the rules and reasons why we might do something like that, and we'll think it's okay here. The problem with that, though, is that because it's common law and it happens at a local level, there's no like national registry of laws, there's no statutes to go by. Each local area had its own like ways and means of handling business, right? So something that was based off a precedent that they felt like they could do, or maybe it wasn't, right? They just created like a new policy. The point being, though, is that it was really sort of unclear. Obviously, we'll kind of agree that murder was probably clearly wrong, right? Or stealing, or killing someone, or getting into a fight was probably wrong. But everything else is sort of like up in the air, right? And because it's up in the air, because there's no established law, that means there's also no established punishment, right? So there isn't like a recommendation that a judge can go to and say, all right, so you stole, Timmy Smith's sheep. I'm gonna like lock you up for 3 days or something like that. So what ended up happening is that what resulted was an extremely uneven, disproportionate, and unstable amount of crime that was being committed. A lot of people didn't know or what to do. It was very uneven and could be at quite times cruel. And you had this issue then of where people, there's a lot of rampant crime. That's mainly because people believe that if there's no rules, there's no expectation of policy, people kind of like kept committing crime because they're like, I'll like be either dead either way, or I'm going to be locked up forever anyway. I might as well be as bad as I can, right? Because if I am making that decision to commit crime, then that's what I got to do, right? And so you have this society where there's hardly any established laws. There's a lot of variation. And what punishments came out, you could be locked up forever, you could be tortured, you could be killed, and something like that. And that's all at a local level with like no oversight. And that's the kind of world that Cesare Beccaria is running in. I heard one professor say Beccaria or Beccaria, and I have no idea how you pronounce it, but we'll just go with whatever I said, right? So with this kind of like background that's into place, you think about like what do you do here, right? And so Beccaria is thinking a lot about philosophy, and this is like at the time of Enlightenment, a lot of new ideas are coming about the way people work, about how governments, we got new art. I mean, it's like a really exciting time. And he comes up with a solution, and he decides not necessarily to figure out like why people commit crime, right? Which is what a lot of our theories later on will talk about. But he takes a different approach, in that he's going to explain why people do not commit crime, right? So it's a different question, right? And in some ways it gets to the same answer, but there's a very key distinction, is that we're looking at people why they do not commit crime, right? So, if we were in class, I would ask you like, hey, what do you guys think? Why do people not commit crime? Like, what do they have to lose? And there's a lot of different explanations that come up for that. But as far as this theory is concerned, right, we're more interested in understanding why people do not commit crime. So, depending on what your view is, right, Beccaria comes to this making a few assumptions, right? He says, has this maybe kind of belief that either people are kind of like neutral, like they aren't born good or bad, right? Maybe they're socialized, maybe they're not, maybe they're just born bad, whatever. He says they're either neutral or like they are, like they're born evil, right? And as humans, right, because like, at this time it's a very religious kind of area, we're born like with sin. If you believe in Judeo-Christian values, we have our worst impulses. And so what we end up doing is not acting on them, right? And so the reason why people do not commit crime is because they like are restricting themselves, right? And the reason why law and society exists is to restrict our inner human impulses, right? So with respect to crime then, like what is it then? So like what exactly what happens? So people do not commit crime, and that's because naturally, even though we have these pleasures that we want, right? Like for me, I love Dr. Pepper. That's because I'm from Texas. I love Dr. Pepper like all the way, right? Like it's my bread and butter. I don't drink it all the time, right? And that's because I'm like resisting a pain, even though there's this pleasure, and that the pain's gonna be, it's a lot of sugar, I feel horrible for doing it. I can't leave behind my redneck past because it's still there every time I see Dr. Pepper. And usually if it's not made with real cane sugar, it tastes like garbage, right? So all these things like go in my head in terms of like why I'm doing it. I'm avoiding this pain, right? So he's making this claim that people are hedonistic, so they prefer pleasure over pain. Another way to view it is that people commit a philosophic calculus. So basically they're trying to figure out like how much joy I'm going to get out of any particular thing. That's basically what we're talking about here. So he makes this comment that people are preferring, they prefer pleasure over pain, and will do things to avoid painful consequences, right? Now, of course, that's going to vary from person to person. What I think is maybe miserable or unfair or unkind, it's going to be different from person to person. But he comes in with this idea, right? Is that people are going to prefer pleasure over pain. So that's going to be like a core idea that we talk about here. And we'll pause the video here. You can take notes or whatever. We'll talk next time.